All right, chapter 7. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. Is you quite snugly there in your nightie? He asked. You isn't friggy cold. I'm fine, Sophie said. I cannot help thinking, said the BFG, about your poor mother and father. By now they must be jipping and scumping all over the house shouting, hello, hello, where has Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and father, Sophie said. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumplet, cried the BFG. Is you not missing them badly? Not really, Sophie said, because I never knew them. You was making me sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. Oh, don't be sad, Sophie said. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from was the village orphanage. We are all orphans in there. You is an orphan? Yes. How many is there in there? 10 of us, said Sophie, all little girls. Was you happy there? The BFG asked. I hated it, Sophie said. The woman who ran it called Miss Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. How is you getting punished? She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink. The rotten old Rotrasper, cried the BFG. It was horrid, Sophie said. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about. The filthy old fizzwiggler, shouted the BFG. That is the horridest thing I ever is hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever. All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of the BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he is telling me my head is full of squashed flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Miss Clonkers locks us in a cellar. The thing that worries me, Sophie said, is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I? All is my fault, said the BFG. I is the one who kid-snatched you. Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed to the floor. Now I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long, Sophie said. I is afraid you will, the BFG said. No, I won't, Sophie said. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never letting that happen, the BFG said. For a few moments, the cave was silent. Then Sophie asked, May I ask you a question? The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. Shoot away, he said. Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it? Aha, cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. Now he is getting nosier than a Parker. And the suitcase you were carrying, Sophie said. What on earth was that all about? The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged at the table. You was asking me to tell you whoopsie big secrets, he said. Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before. I won't tell a soul, Sophie said. I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. You could be telling other giants. No, I couldn't, Sophie said. You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me. And so they would, said the BFG. You is a human being, and human beings is like strawbunkles and cream to those giants. If they're going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything. Would I? Sophie said. You wouldn't, said the BFG. Then why did you say I might? Because I is brimful of buzzburgers, the BFG said. If you listen to everything I am saying, you'll be getting earache. Please tell me what you were doing in our village, Sophie said. I promise you can trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? Sophie said. I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on. The BFG said dreamily, I would so much love to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through green forests picking peachy fruits off all the trees all day long. This is sizzling, hot, muck-frumping country we is living in. Nothing grows in it except snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we will get you an elephant, she said, and peachy fruits as well. Now, tell me, what were you doing in our village? If you is really wanting to know what I am doing in your village, the BFG said, I is blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream? Sophie said. What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant, the BFG said. When all the other giants is galloping off every night, what way in which to swallow human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely, golden dreams, dreams that is giving the dreamers a happy time. Now hang on a moment, Sophie said. Where do you get these dreams? I collect them, said the BFG, waving an arm towards all the rows and rows of bottles on his shelves. I have billions of them. You can't collect a dream, said Sophie. A dream isn't something you can catch a hold of. You is never going to understand about it, the BFG said. That is why I is not wishing to tell you. Oh, please tell me, Sophie said. I will understand. Go on. Tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything. The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs. Dreams, he said, is very mysterious things. They is floating around in the air like whipsy, misty bubbles, and all the time they is searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Sophie asked. Aha, said the BFG. Now he is getting on to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment while Sophie waited. A dream, he said, as it goes whiffling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzing, humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for a human being to be hearing it. Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed up at his enormous truck wheel ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They maybe is looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said. But you must believe me when I say they is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things I can't hear? Sophie said. You is deaf as a dumpling compared with me, cried the BFG. You is hearing only thumpy loud noises with those little earwigs of yours. But I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly? So a ladybird is also a ladybug. So he can hear the footsteps of a ladybug. Honestly, Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet go clumpity, clumpity, clump, like giant footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around in the soil. You mean you can hear ants talking? Every single word, the BFG said, although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes on a very clear night, and if I is swiggling my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling. If I is swiggling them like this and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A weird little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me you was watching me out your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? They is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful. It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off. Is that really true? Sophie asked. You think I is swizz-figgling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping there, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh no, I am not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you. I do really. Please go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbling to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand. That isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that. So please do forgive me and go on. He waited a while longer and then he said, it is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I is chopping an axe into a tree of a big trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from inside the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? A soft moaning sound. It is like the sound an old man is making when he is dying slowly. He paused. The cave was very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes round as bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious music. He seemed almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them. You just ought to be hearing the little mices talking. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Only the mices know that. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is singing sweeter than a nightingale. What else do you hear? One of the biggest chat bags is the cattle piddlers, the BFG said. What do they say? They is arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all they is ever talking about. Is there a dream floating around in here now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not coming to giant country. How do you catch them? The same way you is catching butterflies, the BFG answered, with a net. He stood up and crossed over to a corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net on the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. Suddenly he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry, he said. It is time for eats. That's the end of that chapter. Let me just see how long this chapter is. Okay, it's not a long chapter. This one is called Snozcumbers. If you remember, he said that is all that grows in the land of giants is Snozcumbers. But if you don't eat people like all the other, Sophie said, then what do you live on? That is a squelching, tricky problem around here, the BFG answered. In this slosh-flunking giant country, happy eats like pineapples and pig winkles is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except one extremely icky poo vegetable. It is called the Snozcumber. The Snozcumber? Cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his square white teeth. Yesterday, we was not believing in giants, was we? Today, we is not believing in Snozcumbers. Just because we happen to not have actually seen something with our own two little winkles, we think it's not existing. What about, for instance, the great squizzly Scotch hopper? I beg your pardon, Sophie said. And the humplecrimp. What's that? And the raprascal. The what? And the crumpscottle. Are they animals? They is common animals, said the BFG contemptuously. I is not a very know-it-all giant myself, but it seems to me that you is an absolutely know-nothing human being. Your brain is full of rotten wool. You mean cotton wool, Sophie said. What I mean and what I say is two different things, the BFG announced rather grandly. I will now show you a Snozcumber. The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest looking thing Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long again as an ordinary man, but was much thicker. It was as thick around its girth as a perambulator. It was black with white stripes along its length, and it was covered all over with coarse knobbles. I'll try to show you this picture. That is Snozcumber. Here is the repulsant Snozcumber, cried the BFG, waving it about. I squoggle it. I mispise it. I desponge it. None of those are real words, by the way. But because I is refusing to gobble up human beings like other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up icky poo Snozcumbers instead. If I don't, I will be nothing but skin and groans. You mean skin and bones? Sophie said. I know it is bones, the BFG said, but please understand that I cannot be helping it if I sometimes is saying things a little squiggly. I is trying my very best of all time. The big friendly giant looked suddenly so forlorn that Sophie got quite upset. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to be rude. There never was any schools to teach me talking in giant country, the BFG said sadly. But couldn't your mother have taught you? Sophie said. My mother? Cried the BFG. Giants don't have mothers. Surely you was knowing that. I did not know that, Sophie said. Who ever heard of a woman giant? Giant, shouted the BFG, waving the snozcumber around his head like a lasso. There never was a woman giant, and there never will be one. Giants is always men. Giants is born, the BFG answered. Giants appears, and that's all there is to it. They simply appears, the same way the sun and the stars. And when did you appear? Sophie asked. Now how on earth could I be knowing a thing like that? Said the BFG. It was so long ago, I couldn't count. You mean you don't even know how old you are? No giant is knowing that, the BFG said. All I is knowing about myself is that I is very old, very, very old and crumply, perhaps as old as the earth. What happens when a giant dies? Giants is never dying. Sometimes, and quite suddenly, a giant is disappearing and nobody is ever knowing where he goes to. But mostly giants is simply going on and on like whipsy time twiddlers. The BFG was still holding the awesome snozcumber in his right hand, and now he put one end into his mouth and bit off a huge hunk of it. He started crunching it up, and the noise he made was like the crunching of lumps of ice. It's filthy, he spluttered, speaking with his mouth full and spraying large pieces of snozcumber like bullets in Sophie's direction. Sophie hopped around on the tabletop, ducking out of the way. It's disgustorous. It's sickable. It's rotsome. It's maggot-wise. Try it yourself, this foulsome snozcumber. No, thank you, Sophie said, backing away. It's all you're going to be guzzling around here from now on, so you might as well get used to it, said the BFG. Go on, you snipsy little winkle, have a go. Sophie took a small nibble. Ugh, she spluttered. Oh, no. Gosh, oh, help. She spat it out quickly. It tastes like frog skins, she gasped. And rotten fish. Worse than that, cried the BFG, roaring with laughter. To me, it's tasting of cockroaches and slime wanglers. Of course not, Sophie said. I just love the way. Wait, I think I skipped a page. Or two. There we go. Slime wanglers. Do we really have to eat it? Sophie said. You do, unless you is wanting to become so thin you will be disappearing into thin air. A thick ear is something quite different. Once again, that sad, winsome look came into big BFG's eyes. Words, he said, is oh such a twinkling problem to me all of my life. So you must simply try to be patient and stop squibbling. As I'm telling you before, I know exactly what words I'm wanting to say, but somehow or other they is always getting squickled and around. That happens to everyone, Sophie said. Not like it happens to me, the BFG said. I is speaking the most terrible Wiglish. I think you speak beautifully, Sophie said. You do? Cried the BFG, suddenly brightening. You really do? Simply beautiful. Well, that's the nicest present anybody is ever giving me in my whole life, cried the BFG. Are you sure you are not twiddling my leg? Of course not, Sophie said. I just love the way you talk. How wondercrump, cried the BFG, still beaming. How whoopsie splunkers. How absolutely squiffling is all of a stutter. Listen, Sophie said, we don't have to eat snozcumbers. In the fields around our village, there are all sorts of lovely vegetables like cauliflowers and carrots. Why don't you get some of those next time you go visiting? The BFG raised his great head proudly in the air. I is a very honorable giant. I would rather be chewing up rotten snozcumbers and snitching things from other people. You stole me, Sophie said. I did not steal you very much, said the BFG, smiling gently. After all, you was only a tiny little girl. That's the end of chapter 8. Let me see how long chapter 9 is, because this has been a long recording. I think we're going to hold off on chapter 9. We're going to stop right there. We're going to go ahead and stop our recording. Now, today on the slides, there is a section about nouns. So remember, what are the 3 things that a noun is? Go ahead and type in the chat. A noun is a something, something, or something. Type in the chat if you can. There you go. John said it. A person, place, or thing. Now, some of us missed a lot of the nouns in the sentence that was on our quiz for chapters 1 through 3, like where it said that there was a at the top of the blanket, or I think it was at the top of the blanket. Top in that sentence was going to be is a noun. It's the top of the blanket. And then a lot of you put prepositions in there for nouns, inside and outside. Those are, in that sentence, those were prepositions. There is a little noun exercise on there on the slide. There is a Venn diagram where you're going to describe BFG and compare him to what the other giants are like, just based on what he said the other giants are like. And then there's a cool slide where you get to draw the setting. And I would draw the setting where we are now. The setting in the beginning of the story was just, in her bedroom at the orphanage. And that was just at the very beginning. But the majority of what we've been reading now is in giant country. So you get to draw your best drawing on the screen. It has like pens and stuff for you to draw. Giant country, okay?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording this for now so I can upload this for the friends who were not here this morning. Thank you guys so much for being quiet while I was reading. You did a very good job. I hope you enjoyed those chapters. It's really fun to read. I'm going to see you later.